Welcome to episode 23 of Mina Narrates. I'm your host, Mina. Thanks for joining me in my library. This episode features CaseyWere-Alien's The Secret of Krampus. Now, let me whisper in your ears. For thousands of years, Krampus has terrified children around the world. His massive horns, bottomless basket, and fur wrapped in chain have been enough to strike fear into children for centuries. But I'm here to tell you what you know about him is wrong. I would know because I am him. Well, at least one of him. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of us, all over the world. As the Krampus myth has spread, so have we. We could be your neighbors, your boss, your teacher. There's no real way of knowing who we are, because we look just like you. You see, thousands of years ago in the German mountainside, our families were chosen. It was a time well before writing and modern recorded history, back when magic filled the world and people didn't fear death. Life was full of rituals and peace, when one fateful day my ancestor made a mistake. While honoring the gods for a great harvest and a so far mild winter, they performed a sacrifice of animals and food. The head of the village was a hard and frugal man, so instead of offering the best he had, he offered rotten grains and animals plagued with disease. And in perhaps his most selfish move, instead of offering any of the white asparagus the village had grown, he offered the gods birch branches. The gods were very unamused by this man's cheap nature and sought out to teach him and the village a lesson. For the next year, the village was plagued with famine and drought. Disease ran rampant. People were dying, and the head of the village refused to help as the villages around him prospered. Refusing to acknowledge his hand in the torture and damnation of his village, he acted simply as though nothing was wrong. This angered the gods even further, but the final transgression is when the yearly sacrifice came. On the day we now recognize as December 5th in our modern calendars, a great fire was built. People from the village were afraid, knowing they had angered the gods the previous year, so they brought any and all food and animals they could. But the village head would not allow any of their offerings to be cast into the flames. Instead, he once again threw birch branches in, along with a goat that had died of disease earlier that day. To say the gods were outraged is a pretty big understatement. As the flames crackled, they started glowing a deep purple. The villagers cowered as their stubborn leader cackled and taunted the gods. Suddenly, the flames engulfed him and pulled him into the great bonfire. The villagers watched on, terrified as he screamed. They could see his figure moving in the fire before it slowly started morphing. They watched as he grew in size and his body stretched and contorted, horns sprouting from his head, his tongue lolling out of his mouth and his legs slowly transforming into hooves. As the fire died down, the village could see the result of the gods' full anger. Their leader had been transformed. The gods had seen fit to transform him into a horrendous monster, using the sacrifices he so willingly gave. No longer the man they once knew, they watched as he crawled from the fire, his horns twisted back and into his skull, coming out right below his eyes. His frame was elongated and disproportionate. with arms that drug the ground. Monstrous hooves replaced his feet, and he had massive birch spikes protruding from his back. But most chilling of all was his mouth. He had large fangs that hung below where his chin would be, but his bottom jaw was gone, replaced with a huge tongue that reached his navel, the gods' final retort to him for mocking them. The villagers quickly realized that the gods were not done with their punishment, since they had stood aside unquestionably for their leader and did not make any attempt to honor the gods. They were to be punished, and punished they were. It didn't take but a moment for this creature, the original Krampus, to lunge at the terrified villagers. Without thought or pause, he began pulling the spikes from his back, impaling the small children before ripping them limb from limb with his god-forsaken tongue. He had already consumed 10 when the men of the village were finally able to subdue him, chaining him in a lone hut. Year after year on December 5th, he would break his bonds and gorge himself on children. It was then that the villagers made a pact. Every year on December 5th, they would bring him children. They knew if they could keep him satisfied, he wouldn't be a threat. They also knew they couldn't kidnap children in broad daylight without repercussions. So families each designed a costume, one of long horns and fur. They added chains to remember what bound them to their pact, bells so they could hear each other, and a large basket or sack to take the children away in. They vowed to only take bad children, the ones that life would be easier without. They'd be sorely missed, but they convinced themselves that society would be better off if these kids never made it to adulthood anyway. So from then on, the villagers would spend one day a year hunting children in the nearby villages, each family presenting a sacrifice to prevent Krampus from breaking free and roaming the world. It didn't take long before Krampus became a legend, even if it was a misguided one. As his legend spread and people moved, so did the families. It was easy to blend in and not be challenged when the fear of Krampus was so strong. And given the magic that ran through the world, these child hunters were able to mark the bags and baskets they carried with sigils that transported the children to the beast hidden in the hut on the mountain. This horrifying tradition carried on for hundreds of years up until today. My family is descended from one of the villagers tasked with gathering sacrifices. My costume has been handed down for well over 2,000 years, and my basket is just as old. As time has gone on, we've each added our own touch to the costume, be it a bell or chain, or maybe a bundle of birch twigs. My father learned how to hunt and awaken the sigil, and he learned from his father, and so on, before passing it down to me. With the development of technology, consumerism, and even the internet, the Krampus myth has spread around the world, allowing us to venture pretty much anywhere we please. I remember as a child, my dad taking me hunting in the woods, teaching me how to scale trees and move without making a sound. He taught me how to silence small animals before killing them, and how to use a birch spike to make a silent and efficient kill. He would set up hunting cameras and make me move through an obstacle course to make sure I could be quick and aware enough of my surroundings not to get caught. We've come a long way since those first hunters, but we keep the tradition alive, and I'd like to think we've done the world a service by providing them an old legend to help keep kids in line. The reason I'm writing this is because there's been a problem. A few, actually. Not with my skills or even what I do. I enjoy it far more than I should, ridding the world of those children who would do nothing but harm. The problems are far greater than that. Through the millennium is that magic has gotten weaker. It's nearly drained from this world, and our sigil's active period grows shorter and shorter every year. And it's been so long since we've had to deliver our bounty that we don't know where the hut is the real Krampus is kept. If we don't find a way to retain the magic in this world, he will be free. He may very well be soon anyway, given the second issue at hand. Technology is great. It's improving our quality of life and our health and all sorts of stuff. It's not so great when you have a 2,000-something-year-old goat man you're trying to keep fed. A hunting camera was easy. It took still photos every so many seconds or minutes, and you just had to listen for a click to know when to move. These new security systems they have now have made getting into a home to steal a child almost impossible. They have doorbells with cameras you can view from your phone, security systems, alarms that screech, silent alarms, systems that alert police. I even came across a house with sensors at the roof to make sure nothing was close to the solar panels they installed. Last hunt we lost one of my Russian cousins to a conspiracy theorist with a gun and way too much time on his hands. We can't afford to lose any more hunters, because when we lose hunters, it cuts the number of our sacrifices down. Now I know what you're thinking. Why not just snatch a kid when you see one? 1. Cameras. Part of the reason we're in this mess to begin with. 2. All the stranger danger has really kinda made that impossible. You even sneeze at a kid's general direction, and everyone looks at you thanks to all those serial killers that have decided to make kids their business the last few decades. So my fake Krampus friend, why don't you just sacrifice an adult? Well, to be frank, adults don't fit in the bag. The real Krampus never ate kids. So it's not like my ancestors thousands of years ago thought of making adult-sized bags. Plus the sigils, as weak as they are in the bottom of the bags and baskets. There's not enough magic in the world for all of us to redraw the sigils and actually have them work. This year we barely got enough kids in time to keep Krampus contained. And I'm terrified that next year we won't be able to. So here I am, turning to the biggest and most powerful resource any person could have. You, the internet. I hope that at least a few of you believe me. Krampus has spent years in chains, just saving his energy and biding his time till he can be free. And to be honest, we don't know what he's entirely capable of. So if you happen to have a snot-nosed cousin who likes exposing your diary to the world, or maybe your little sister is being tormented by a bully at school, drop me a message. I just need a name and address, and I can put them on the list for next year. If you live at home with an insufferable child, drop me a line and your security system's access code. It sounds horrible, I know, but if we work together and make the sacrifices we need to, we can keep Krampus contained and keep him from eating all the children in the world, and maybe even worse. If you can't help us get a child, then please keep the legend of Krampus alive. Tell the stories. Go to the parades and festivals. Maybe that will be enough to keep us safe if we are caught. Let the fear and stories spread, so no one learns what real fear is. Thank you for listening to The Secret of Krampus by CaseyWere-Alien and making it to the end of the story. While she has no books I can point you to go buy, I can tell you she has many stories on Reddit, like this one, which I will provide a link to in the description. I'm also adding a link to her Etsy account. Casey has been providing her crafts at reasonable prices to provide the best products she can for her customers. Check her writing and her crafts out. What did you think of this story? Have you heard other stories of Krampus? Let me know what you think in the comments. While you're down there, please give the video a like and share it out. If you aren't subscribed, consider subscribing and ringing the bell so it rings so you don't miss the next video. I want to say thank you to all of you who have subscribed. I appreciate your faith in me and enjoyment of my content. I love and appreciate all of you. Thank you to everyone who has been so welcoming, supportive, and helpful. Until we meet again, be safe.